Friday afternoon on such a beautiful day. I think you must all be a big fan of U.S. Japan relations or big personal fan of Ambassador Ishii.
No chance.
Or both. And for those of you who have just joined us online, welcome. My name is Yuki Tatsumi. I'm a director of Japan program and a co-director of the East Asia program here at Stimson. And it's a great honor to welcome Ambassador Ishii to Stimson for speaking engagements. He has visited Stimson previously, but it is just for personal meeting with my boss and other scholars at Stimson. But this is really the first time for him to speak in public like this. So very grateful for your time. For many of you, he really does not need any introduction. But for those of you who have met him for the first time, let me just quickly go through this. So Ambassador Masafumi Ishii was the ambassador of Japan to Indonesia until December 2020 and retired from a Japanese foreign service in January 2021, having a very distinguished career for more than 40 years. He has been actually posted in Washington twice, both in a political section, working on the alliance, U.S. Japan alliance related issues. After he graduated from University of Tokyo, he joined MOFA in 1980. And like I mentioned, his post in Tokyo also included Director for Policy Planning, Special Assistant for Foreign Minister, Director General for Global Issues, and Legal Advisor. His overseas assignment, as I mentioned, includes Washington, D.C. But then other than that, well, actually D.C., like I said, he served here twice. And he has been posted in London, Belgium, and NATO as an ambassador. His last position was in Jakarta. That lasted for almost 4 years. Wow, you've been there that long? Wow. It didn't feel that long to me because I've always enjoyed watching his Facebook posts with various events in Indonesia where he wears his Indonesian shirt. And he has frequently participated in international seminars and symposiums like this, and is very well known for his policy planning insight as well as his long-term experience in working with partners in ASEAN countries. Currently, he is teaching international law at Gakushuin University, which is the university for Japanese imperial household members to go, as well as providing advice to some of the Japanese private companies. The way that this seminar is going to work is just like any other public seminar that we do here at Stimson. I will open up the conversation by asking Ambassador Ishii a few questions to just open the session, and then after that, we'll go right into the question and answer. You should all have the little card that has a QR code or a website address to post your questions, and all those questions are going to come in here. And then I'll try to pick up as many as I can within the next hour. So without further ado, Ishii-san, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me on a Friday afternoon. You could be doing something else, so I really appreciate enjoying the weather, but I really appreciate you joining me today. So this week was, as you well know, exciting week for U.S.-Japan relations. Prime Minister just left for North Carolina last night. So it's probably very fresh, still in your memory, and so is mine. But how do you evaluate this visit by Prime Minister Kishida this time?
I think every visit of Prime Minister has to be a success, but I think this time, I think he did a really good job. After all, this is the first state visit by Japanese Prime Minister in 9 years. The last time was Abe, who has a very strong personality, very high reputation. And I think it must have been very difficult to follow sort of the precedent. But I think he did a really good job, and then this is partly based upon the good chemistry existing between Prime Minister Abe and President Biden. I think they are looking towards the same direction. So, and I think a very important keyword for this visit was global partnership. And I think the thing is, the most striking thing I found was the main theme of his congressional speech. He said that global order, which was created since the end of the Second World War by the United States, has been under unprecedented challenges. And we do need the United States' continuous commitment to maintain that order. But the important part is you don't have to do it by yourself. That's what he said. I mean, the United States doesn't have to do it by itself. And we are happy to share the burden or share the responsibility for maintaining it. So I think today I want to touch upon what was discussed during the summit meeting, but I think more importantly, what we are going to do after this good meeting, and which has to follow the basic understanding that our relation has become very global and the responsibility sharing. So I think that's what I'm going to talk about mainly. And if you are interested in what it means specifically in relation to some challenges, like challenges China poses to us, more specifically Taiwan, I'm happy to respond if you have some questions.
Great. So now we have this great summit,
Yep.
and basically elevated the relationship with
Yep.
To the kind of a new height, if you will.
Yeah.
So where do you see, including the tide of U.S. Japan relations, how do you see the trend line of international politics or international diplomacy as a whole for the
Okay,
next
sure.
20 years?
Before starting that, I'm happy to mention that this is the 35th anniversary of the establishment of Stimson Center, and this is a 20 year of contribution or service by Yuki Tatsumi. So she's been here for 20 years. Wow.
Wow.
That's a long time. Right?
Yes.
So
Not as long as the
I'm
time you're
very happy
forced
to be
it.
back here. Last time I was in Washington, I was posted in Washington was 2006 to 2008. I was going through the Obama election, which was a big experience, and then I left before the inauguration ceremony.
Oh, that's right. You missed that.
So yeah, but I saw the excitement on the day of the voting, and it's really something. So, and previous time was 1993 to 1996 under Clinton administration, and it's also a fun time.
That was when the U.S. and Japan first revised the
Yeah,
defense
that
guidelines
was
and
the time
kind of
of
upgraded
what
that.
we call the redefinition of the Japan-US Security Treaty. At that time, the end of Cold War, so we need to the Japan-US Security Treaty was supposed to be for surviving during the Cold War, but Soviet Union were gone. So what does after the end of the Soviet Union, what would be the meaning of Japan-US Security Alliance? That's what we did in 1995,
Yes.
5 or 6.
5, 6.
And then we decided to make the alliance more operational to respond to the regional contingencies like North Korea.
Yeah. But you couldn't say regional contingencies at that time.
Well,
You were kind of.
kind of, yeah.
Kind of.
Well, we couldn't say Taiwan Strait at that time, but
No.
now we say a lot. We talk a lot about it.
That alone is a change.
And then now maybe a possible intrusion from Russia, which we used to worry about, but
It's a full cycle,
yeah.
if you will.
Then our attention was shifted toward China's threat, but now we are redirecting our attention towards Russia again. So, in response to the Taiwan contingency, we have every intention and reason for moving our forces away from the north, redirecting them to the south. But I think now that we have to pay a little bit more attention to the possibility of the Russian move, as well as the North Korea's threat. So we may have to maintain some part of our forces in the north. So that has a big impact on preparedness in dealing with things like Taiwan contingency. But let me start. Oops. I think you all know what Kishida did, and he's still in town, and he's leaving today. Yeah?
Is it, or was it last
But
May
anyway.
that he left for anyway? But he's in the country
Yeah,
still.
he's in North Carolina. And as I said, this is the first state visit in 9 years. And state visit means congressional speech plus visit to other state other than Washington, D.C. That was North Carolina. And visit to North Carolina was to highlight the contribution of Japanese private companies to U.S. economy and acknowledge a broad base of bilateral cooperation. And I think, as I said, important part is acknowledging free and open rule-based international order is under unprecedented challenge, and Japan-US are indispensable global partners for its maintenance. And in that regard, the first Japan-US-Philippines summit meeting should be noted as well. Japan and the United States are the indispensable partners for maintaining comprehensive competitiveness in advanced technology and leading sustainable and inclusive economic growth. So there are a lot of announcements about the specific cooperation in the space, semiconductor, AI, clean energy, quantum, and 5Gs. And interesting part is cooperation for the Artemis program for lunar exploration. So in a few years' time, Japanese national will be landing on the face of moon.
And Moon Rover by Toyota. Right?
Yeah, that's right. Okay. Then I think joint statement together with the fact sheets that covered a lot of ground, but it seems joint statements are 11 pages and the fact sheets are 17 pages. Actually, I haven't read them all. So I think good news is that those who are interested in Japan-US relations have something to read. And once you start reading, it covers a lot of ground. So you found out how extensive our cooperation has become. But those who are not interested in that much Japan-US relations, I think it's a little bit too long.
Maybe they need executive summary.
Yeah, and I think whenever we do things like this, I mean the joint statement plus fact sheet, we make one of them a little bit shorter and crisp. So, but this time both are very long. So I'm not criticizing anybody, but I do know they have a good content. So I highly recommend you to read, and I have to read it myself. But so it covers. The title is a global partner for the future items. It covers a lot of ground, starting from defense and security cooperation, which was the most extensive one, and also to the strengthening human linkage, so the exchange of students and creation of new scholarship and so on and so forth. And but I could find kind of three keywords. First keyword is comprehensive and global partnership. Comprehensive means a lot of ground covered by the joint statement. The global means, as I said, Japan, U.S., Philippines summit meeting was there. So I think our relation is expanded in a global context. Second keyword is practical and specific cooperation. I think talking about principle, spirits is good, but it has to be supported by the actual cooperation on the ground. And in that regard, I think a guy like Kurt Campbell were telling the press that there are 70 deliverables.
That's
so
a lot.
Yeah, there are a lot of things, lot of deliverables, and which means there are many things to be followed up. And the third, I think, keyword is responsible and reliable. Japan is a responsible and reliable partner. I think you used to say that China should become a responsible stakeholder. So now it turns out not to be the case. But I think Japan is now this time regarded as a responsible and reliable partner, which is a very important message for us. And where as I said, main message of the congressional speech was the U.S. does not need to maintain the order single-handedly. Japan and the United States carry a responsibility together, and Japan and the U.S. are global partners for the future, essential to the peace and freedom. So this is a kind of main theme of his visit. And after all, of course, the objective of the visit was to impress upon the U.S. public about the width and the depth and the indispensability or indispensableness of Japan-U.S. partnership, the joint statement and everything. And of course, it cannot be denied that it has an element of shadow boxing to be ready for the November election and pin down the present excellent bilateral relations. Of course, whatever you do to pin down the relations, if new president comes in, he or she can change it completely. So we know there's a limit, but it doesn't stop us from doing something to impress where we are. I think how good our relations at this time, and how many things we can do together. So that's where we are. So now I'm moving to the second question of Yuki. Why are we doing this? Against what background? I'm going to talk about two things. That is, where are we going to be in the in the mid to long-term future, let's say 20 years. So in other words, which countries are going to become important for our bilateral cooperation? And second thing is, where are we now? What kind of world we are now living in? So the first point, where are we going to in 20 years? I think I can comfortably say that U.S. is the only superpower this time, now, but I think we used to talk about G2, yeah? Japan, China, U.S., China, governing the world, splitting the world into the two or something. But I don't think G2 is going to happen. I think G3 to be joined by U.S. and China to be joined by India will be what's happened in the future. At this time, U.S. is the only superpower. I think U.S. GDP is still 1.5 more than that of Chinese, and the defense spending 2.5 more than that of Chinese. And you know the U.S. defense spending is how many percent of the global defense spending aggregated? 10%, 20%, 40%. 10%, those who think 10% just raise hand. 20% raise hand. 40% raise hand. Okay, yes, 40%. So, and your defense spending, which we would hope would be much more increased, is more than the aggregation of defense spending of number 2 China to number 12 Italy. So combined. So I think you are spending a lot on defense spending, and then more importantly, defense spending matters. The total volume which have been spent matters, rather than the pace of increase. So in that regard, I think, of course, the Chinese defense spending is increasing very rapidly, 7% every year. But still, the money spent by the U.S. In the past, aggregated, made the U.S. military force very, very strong. But sorry, in 20 years or let's say 10 years, around 2040 or 2030, there will be 3 top-tier countries. I would say 3 superpowers will emerge: U.S., China, and India. I think sooner or later, although the Chinese economy is slowing down, I think considering the size of the Chinese population, which is 4 times larger than the United States, I think China's GDP will become more than that of the United States sometime in 2030s. And even defense spending, if the pace of the increase of the Chinese defense spending continues, I think your defense spending will become around the same level towards the end of 2030s. So it does sound like G2, but I think, as you know, the Indian population becomes the world's largest last year. And then China's population is now in decline. They are aging very fast. And Japan is known as the fastly aging society, but I think the share of the population out of work, which means less than 15 and more than 65, I mean, Japan, the ratio is now 38%, 40%.
Wow.
Yeah, and I think China's ratio, that ratio, will become as high as the Japanese ratio present around 2050. So, that means China has only 30 more years to be prepared for that kind of aging happening in Japan. Japan, we've been fortunate because we became rich before becoming old. So we have accumulated a lot of wealth. We have created a social security system, care house system, and so on and so forth, pension system. But China has only 30 years. So it does appear the case that China will become old before becoming rich. So I think that will certainly slow down the Chinese economy, as I said. And Indian GDP will take over Japan's soon. When do you think it will happen? Next year, 2030, 2035. Those who think next year, raise hand. 2030, raise hand. 2035, raise hand. Actually, next year. Next year, Japan, 2022, Japan's GDP was overtaken by Germans, which has only 2/3 of the population of Japan, so which should be a big shock for us. But there is the issue of the exchange rate, so we can swallow it. But India, once India takes over Japan's GDP in next year, I think it's just whoosh, so we can never catch up. The same thing happened when China took over our GDP. Our GDP became a world number 2, overtaking Germans in as early as 1968, 23 years after the end of the Second World War, where Japan was completely devastated. So after that, we stayed in number 2 only after the United States until 2010. So more than 40 years. Then China took us over in 2010, and then it's been only 14 years since we've been overtaken by China. But China's GDP is how many times more than that of Japan at this time? Twice as much, 3 times as much, 4 times as much. Those who think twice as much, raise hand. 3 times as much, 4 times as much. Yes, I think you know that this is 4 times as much as of Japan. So it happens in the past 14 years. So that shows how fast China has been growing in the past few decades. So, but that's sort of side issue. But my point is, I think China and U.S. will become more or less the same level in terms of GDP and defense spending sometime in 2030s. But around that time, around the same time, Indian population will be the world largest, and also the Indian GDP will be world number 4, I think. China, U.S., India, and Japan. I hope we will stick around number 4, but I don't know. Now that's so. My point is, sometime in era of 2030 is the era where the direction or positioning of these 3 superpowers will decide the direction of the world. Second trend we need to bear in mind is Indonesia and India will be decisive for creating majority. I think I'm talking about this later, but the rule of the game at this time is creating majority. We talk a lot about global south and then who is on which side and so on and so forth. But in that regard, I think creating a majority is very, very important. And I would argue that positioning of India and Indonesia will decide the global majority. Why? But if we try to create a new G7 in 2040, I think it would look like G3, China, US, and India, plus Japan, number 4, number 5 GDP, and actually Indonesia. I'm not talking about this because I was the Japanese ambassador in Indonesia, but I like Indonesia, but there are a lot of studies saying that if the present growth trend continues, Indonesia's GDP will take over Japan sometime in 2040s, 2045. So Indonesia will be definitely among top 5. Then, in order to make it 7, I think the other 2 are Europe, if it stays united, and I'm afraid Russia. Even after the Ukraine war, Russia is not going to go away. Russia will become a more difficult power to deal with because they have to rely on the existing privilege, including a huge number of nuclear weapons, plus their privilege like a veto power in the United Nations Security Council. So their economy is now smaller than the economy of Korea. And it's first declining. And of course, their population is in decline. But with those privileges, Russia, with a small economy, Russia cannot make good things happen. But Russia is still able to stop good things from happening. So it's a power I don't want to work with.
So it's kind of like passive aggressive.
Yeah, kind of. So it's a very not a good power to work with, I think. But anyway, so if this is a member of G7, what if things like a Ukraine war happens at that time? I think what we are seeing at this time after Ukraine war, more or less the same thing will happen in 2040s, which means on the one side, we have U.S., Japan, and Europe sticking together. On the other side, we have China and Russia sticking together. Although China and Russia are not seeing eye to eye each other, their positions are different, but still, in a relative way, they are on the other side. So who are left in between? India and Indonesia. So to which side these 2 big guys? India and Indonesia are both big guys, right? India has the largest population. Indonesia's population is twice as much as of Japan, which is 250 million, 270 million actually, and still increasing. So to which side these 2 big guys move an inch closer to will decide the global majority. That's why it's very important to bring them at least an inch closer to us, not to the other side. But it's not so easy to do that because these 2 guys are very big enough to stay independent, big enough not to ally with anybody, and big enough to make their own decision based upon their own national interest. So you need to make every effort during the peaceful time to bring them closer to us. That's what I think Japan has been doing. Now, third trend is, sorry, I'm spending too much time here. Okay, I'll make it faster. I think de facto division expands among ASEAN countries, and Southeast Asia becomes the center of a competition over influence among U.S., China, and then India. You know, after all, that area is called Indo-China area, which means historically that was the place where the influence of India from the west and China from the north collided with each other. Now India is a little bit detached, but it will come back. And now we see the competition between US and China taking place in Southeast Asian countries. And I think it's natural for those Southeastern countries to say that in public, don't force us to choose because we are not going to choose anyway. And it is true that during peaceful time, they have every reason for maintaining good relation with everybody so that they can get the best out of them. So whether it's China or United States, Japan, European Union, Korea, I think they've been trying to maintain relation with everybody. So it doesn't make sense for them to make choice in terms of taking side. So that's what they are saying. But my view is I think they have already chosen in their own mind, simply because of their strategic situation, historical background, geostrategic positioning, and so on and so forth. Actually, Japanese Foreign Ministry has been carrying out opinion polls since 2008, and every 2 years. And one of the consistent questions have been, which country are you going to rely on more in future? Which country, in your mind, do you think will become more important for you in future? And then idea is those who say Japan, or those who say China, or those who say the United States. And there are only, among 10 ASEAN countries, there are only 3 countries which have consistently said that Japan will become more important than China. Only 3 countries. So those countries I call big 3, Indonesia, Vietnam, and the Philippines. They are the countries with a population more than 100 million. So I think they think they are big enough to stay independent. They are big enough to say no to what China asked them to do, even by using the support coming from outside, like by Japanese or by the United States, I think. So those guys are ready to rely on us, so we have to be nice to them. And mid-3, Thailand, Malaysia, Myanmar, they are like 50 million, 80 million kind of population. They are very important for us. You know, Thailand has the largest concentration of Japanese business in Southeast Asia. Malaysia used to have the Look East policy. There are a lot of former students in Japan who can speak Japanese, who learn the sort of business way of carrying out business from Japan. Very, very important countries. But result of the opinion poll shows a swing between China and Japan, according to different administrations. It's very clear. It just swings between China and Japan. And the small 3, Cambodia, Laos, Republic, and Brunei, I think they have not much choice in terms of trade partners, investment. So I think these 3 countries, particularly Cambodia, is very important for us. We are happy to help them, but I think we should control our expectations as to what they can do at the time of crisis. And last but not least, the special exception is Singapore. If you ask the question, which country will become more important for you, to those people on the street, 95% of say, of course, China. But if you look around, they have a U.S. Navy and the U.S. Air Force stationed in their port and airport. They have given their seaport and airport for the usage of U.S. forces, U.S. Air Force and Navy since 1990s. And that was a time when U.S. decided to leave the Philippines, which U.S. regretted very much. And then U.S. was in search of alternative places to stay. And then it's Singapore special. Singapore actually knocked the door of the United States, saying that we are ready to do it if you want. So I think Singapore did a great job in selling the value of its own value of the country. So I think you know Singapore has a lot of investment from mainland China, a lot of collaboration with China in mainland, but their military forces training takes place where? In Thailand. I mean, in Taiwan. Nowadays, they do some training in Australia, but mainly in Taiwan. And the place their former prime ministers play golf most of the time was Taiwan. So I think Singapore is able to bet on both sides, China and the United States, China and mainland China and Taiwan. So it's kind of strange, but they are allowed to do that. So this is a spread, in my mind, of the 10 ASEAN countries. And of course, the main policy of Japan in dealing with ASEAN countries is to, support the unity of ASEAN. ASEAN is always in the driving seat. We honor their initiatives, which will continue to be the same. But now our resources have become more limited. We have to prioritize how to use it. So from that viewpoint, I think I wouldn't be surprised if we spend more asset. We use more asset in supporting the big 3 who are ready to rely on us.
Thank you. So In that context, as you mentioned, at the end of the U.S. Japan summit, there also was the U.S. Japan Philippines summit. So, based upon those things, I mean, that alone is a big development. How do you think Japan should continue to engage? You already kind of gave a flavor of different viewpoints from ASEAN countries, but how should Japan continue to engage with countries like India, Southeast Asia, and then also more broadly Global South that you mentioned?
I think I'll take this question in the context of how to deal with the Global South.
Yeah.
Before doing that, I need to tell you how I see where we are now. I think rule of the game is now to create majority in international scene. And, this is where United States and Japan have still advantage over Russia and China. Of course, Russia and China.
I think your microphone might be out of battery, so she's bringing. That's a backup.
Sorry, Russia and China are making friends with North Korea, Iran. That's fine, but I think we are in a better position to be able to create reasonable and more useful friends. And so I think, anyway, just skip the second part. And also we are, this is something new, but we are in the era of what I call challenge sharing. We used to say, talk about burden sharing, 1990s, 2000, and so on and so forth. I think what burden sharing means is that the U.S. could handle the challenges all by itself. U.S. was strong enough to be able to do that. I think U.S. can still do it now, but all by itself, but it requires some costs. So I think U.S. really hoping that allies can share some of the burden for handling challenges in the form of cost. But U.S. was able as well as willing to take care of all the challenges by itself. And as I said, although U.S. is still the only superpower, so if it so wishes, you can still do that. But I think U.S. will or readiness to take up all the challenges by itself has been significantly weakened. And so after all, it's been 10 years since President Obama said the U.S. should not continue to act like a policeman for the whole world. And we always say, sorry, I shouldn't talk too much about U.S. politics, but I think we always say Trump did not, it's not that Trump created President of the United States. I think the situation in the United States created a guy like Trump. That's our understanding. So I think your readiness, your incentive, or your willingness to take up all the challenges has been weakened. I think faster than we expected, I think. So, so new era is a challenge sharing where the U.S. is no longer willing to take up the challenges by itself and would like to see allies and like-minded countries to share responsibilities for handling challenges themselves while sharing the burden in terms of cost is taken for granted. So I think this thinking is behind Kishida's theme of U.S. doesn't have to do it. Well, we still need United States commitment, but you don't have to do it by yourself because we are ready to share burden, share responsibilities. So I think this is where we are. We need to really understand that. And if that is correct, to adjust to the era of challenge sharing, I think sanction regime, which is a negative linkage. If you do something wrong, you'll be punished. Rather than that system, I think we need to move to a new system where what I call reward regime, which means if you do something good, you are rewarded with something. So I know there are cases where only sanction can work. Like what if for example, China invades into Taiwan? I think we will have to come up with a very robust system of sanction, economic sanction, in addition to other things. But I think that will need to be a little bit of exceptional. I think rather than relying on the sanction, because I think sanction regime has become increasingly divisive, right? So I think asking country to vote yes to the criticism or criticizing Russian invasion is relatively easy. But if you ask them to become a part of sanction regime, I think the number of those who say yes is far less than those who say yes to the criticism. So I think sanction regime has made the world more divisive, which means sanction has become less effective anyway. So I think and also, as I said in the outset, the rule of the game at this time is to make more friends, to create majority. So from that viewpoint, I think reward regime makes much more sense.
So basically positive incentive.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Now, moving on to a little bit more specific thing, Global South. What does it mean to engage Global South? I think there's no country called Global South. There's no group of countries who have the same view or positioning as a Global South. I think now the world has become very, very complicated. During the Cold War, we have to take care of the view of Soviet Union and the United States, period. But now we have Russia, we have United States, we have China, we have Japan, we have European Union, so we have India. So I think each country is having a lot of trouble in deciding their own positioning. They have to take into consideration all the possible reactions of those powers. So it must be very difficult to do it, which means there aren't, their view or their positioning is different from country to country based upon their own national interests. So I think calling them all together as a Global South and say that we need to engage Global South doesn't mean much, because we need to use what I call tailored approach, because the positioning of each country is different. So you need to take into consideration the reason for their different positioning, and then take that into consideration and decide how to approach them. So reflecting strategic positioning of each Global South country, we need to use a tailored approach. That's first keyword. Second keyword is prioritize and concentrate. I think we, allies and like-minded countries, need to identify strong and influential countries among Global South and prioritize in strengthening our relation with them. And I will explain the examples, but last year, the BRICS decided to expand its membership. But there are countries which are not included in the expansion. So some of them, their feeling has been hurt, I think. So we need to take good care of them. This is a time to engage for those countries. And last point is coordinate and divide responsibilities. I think we need to share the recognition of the priority countries with allies and like-minded countries, and then establish division of labor among like-minded countries. And the best place for coordination should be, I think, places like G7, which involves Japan, United States, and also European Union influential guys. Japan came up with the 3 strategic document, December 2022. Now we are talking a lot about strategies. Why? Because our resources have become limited. If you have abundant resources, you don't have to prioritize. If you can use your resources without limitation, you don't need strategies, because you don't have to prioritize the usage of resources. I think the strategy has become very important because our resources, not only Japan but United States resources, have become increasingly limited. Now, okay, how to prioritize? This shows the spread of the Global South countries in accordance with the size of their GDP and region by region. in the same region, for example, Asia, those countries on the left-hand side has a population more than 50 million. Those on the right-hand side has a population less than 50 million. So the the countries on the upper part and on the left-hand side in the region has a bigger population and a bigger GDP. Now, let's find out who became a new member of BRICS. First, Argentina in Latin America. Actually, at the end of the day, they said no. So Argentina decided not to join. But Argentina's GDP is world number 23rd. Mexico has a much bigger GDP, and the population is much bigger than Argentina. So our question is, why not Mexico? I think even in the eyes of the China and Russia, I think Mexico is on the American camp. That's why I think they didn't ask Mexico to join. Now Middle East, who were chosen? Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Iran. Why not Turkey? Turkey's GDP is 2.5 times more than that of Iranians, and the population is more or less the same. So I think Turkey is not very happy about this choice. And of course, it's very difficult to deal with a guy like Erdogan, but I think after all, Turkey is a very, very important country, and who doesn't think good about BRICS, so this is a good time for us to engage. Africa, they chose Egypt, South Africa is already in, and Ethiopia. Egypt is one of the top 3 GDP countries in Africa, and the population is big. Ethiopia, although it's 62nd in terms of GDP, it has a big and growing population, and Ethiopia will continue to become a very, very important country. Recently under increasing influence by China. Egypt historically and at presently maintains a very good relation with Russia and China as well. So my question is, why not Nigeria? Nigeria has the largest population in Africa, largest GDP in Africa. So I'm sure Nigeria's pride was very much hurt by this choice. So this is a time for us to engage into Nigeria. More importantly, Asia, no country joined BRICS. Actually, Indonesia was asked to join, but Indonesia said no, and they wanted to join OECD instead, because they want their priorities to become sort of developed countries. So, but some other reason is that I think the BRICS has become anti-American organization, while things like Quad, Japan, U.S., Australia, and India, has been painted by China as an anti-Chinese organization. So in Indonesia, as I said, is a very big country, and big enough to make their own decisions based upon their own national interests. So I think Indonesia decided not to take sides. So joining BRICS means taking side of China. Joining Quad means taking side of the United States. So Indonesia decided not to do either. So I think, and as I said, Indonesia will become increasingly important in the coming decades. So this is the time to engage Indonesia as well. So I think we need to pick up these countries, these important countries, and concentrate on them. And I'm happy to say that in terms of in Asia, I think our recognition is increasingly in sync with Americans. I think they understand the importance of Indonesia. They have started big joint exercises with Indonesia. And I think the Philippines is your allies. And we had Japan-US Philippines summit meeting this time. And Vietnam, President Biden visited Vietnam last year, even though he skipped the summit meeting of the ASEAN countries, ASEAN summit. So I think now on the ground, U.S. Business relation with Vietnam is growing very fast, particularly in relation to the semiconductor. Investment from the United States is still, in absolute term, lower than, far smaller than the investment from China. But I think pace of increase has been very remarkable. So I think in Asia, priority countries, we share the same kind of recognition about priority countries. So we need to do the same for other areas. Sorry, this is perhaps the last slide. I was talking about dividing labor, and as I said, I think we are better positioned in terms of the number of influential, like-minded countries and partners compared with China and Russia. So we can effectively share our divided labor, and as long as we have the same view about who are the priority partners and what we need from each one of them, and what we should do now to achieve that end. And the third in regional division, Southeast Asia, I think Japan can do a lot of things. And it's after all in the backyard. And Australia can help from the south. Central Asia, I think India has an extensive relation nowadays with Central Asian countries. And Japan has a long history of engaging into the Central Asian countries. So we can both do something. South Pacific, Australia is best positioned for engaging them, and plus Japan. And but more importantly, I think Africa and Middle East is after all in the backyard of Europe, and it's going to be Europe to be affected by the destabilized African Middle East by the flow of immigration, flow of the terrorism. So I think this is not a good time for French peacekeepers leaving Sahel countries, but this is a time for them to engage. Otherwise, you see the intrusion of the Wagner group of Russia and also China. So, and Middle East, although I think Europe's influence has been declined, I think Europe, the country which created the problem of Israel and Palestine. So I think they have a responsibility to stay engaged. And I think India can do a lot in helping Europe, particularly in Africa. There are a lot of Indian diasporas in Africa, which has a very influential position in terms of business. And Latin America is in the backyard of the United States, and I think it's your responsibility to take care of them. And I don't think situation in Latin America is the best state at this time, but I think it's a area of responsibility of the United States. And going back to Africa and Middle East, if Europe doesn't do anything, doesn't do enough, I think at the end of the day, U.S. will be called up, which means the military forces which could have been spared for Asia, for us, has to be concentrated on Africa. So we will be indirectly affected. That's why we've been asking Europe to be more serious, more seriously taking care of Africa and Middle East. So these are the how I see the engaging Global South, and these are the things we should do to follow up the agreement this time between Prime Minister Kishida and President Biden that we are global partners. So we need to cover the globe.
Thank you, Ambassador. So we have a few minutes left for a couple of questions, I hope. One global grouping that you did not mention in your opening is the United Nations. UN is holding the Summit of the Future in September, and the UN Security Council reform, or UN reform in general, could be could be on the board, could be on the discussion board. So does Japan still seek a permanent seat on the U.S. Security Council with or without a veto? Because there are a lot of options in the past. And how should the makeup of the, given what you just laid out, what's your opinion and how the makeup of the Security Council needs to look like by 2040?
Very, very good question. I think United Nations is one and only. You cannot create a second United Nations, which will be much worse than the present United Nations. So I think you need to stick to the existing one, although United Nations is not perfect, but you need to make it more effective, a little bit stronger, more organized. So that's the direction we are shooting for. And Security Council reform is a very important part of our efforts for making United Nations more effective and more legitimate, I think. And which is included, I think, references included in a joint statement this time. And the U.S. expressed support for Japan becoming a permanent member, sort of with a full-fledged capabilities, including veto power. That's more or less a direction we are still shooting for. I'm not a member of government anymore, so I can speak a little bit more freely. But I think, as I said, this is a time for making majority. You need to get the yes vote from many countries. And I think veto power is the real problem of the Security Council at this time, and it became really clear after Ukraine. And then it will become clear if China invades Taiwan, I think. So I don't think there is an appetite among the normal United Nations members to increase Security Council member which has vetoes. So I think sticking to veto is not the best way to create majority, I think. And also, my view is if you stick to creating the permanent member of Security Council, it's going to be very difficult to create a majority, simply because, as I said in relation to BRICS new membership, if you pick up one permanent member country, you create 5 or 6 more enemies.
Right.
Because
Those
there are countries who
not
think,
picked.
why not me? So if you pick up, for example, India, I'm sure Indonesia will say that, why not me? So I think we need to create create a system where more countries think that we may be chosen as a member of new Security Council. So sort of more inclusive, open and system is a way to create a majority, I believe. So we used to talk about super non-permanent seat, which means at present, if you become a non-permanent member, term is 2 years and then no re-election. So if you are chosen, you stay there for 2 years and you have to wait 2 more years and then you come back, right? So why not if we make this a 2-year term like 4-year or 6 year and then re-electable. Once you are re-elected, you are in the Security Council for 12 years or 8 years, which is permanent enough, I think. So, and then increasing the number, which means that there are possibilities or opportunities for other countries other than Japan, India, Germany, and those G4, yeah? They feel that they may be chosen. So that is a way to, I think, create a majority. But in order to make this super non-permanent seat happen, you need to create a situation where everybody feels that reform is inevitable, reform is necessary. And so in order to create that kind of steam building up, I think for the time being we should stick to the increase of permanent member seat and then just put a lot of pressure on the countries with this kind of very divisive proposal, and then letting them on the tour, making them feel that they need to come up with some sort of compromise. Then, at the very last moment, you propose non-permanent, super non-permanent member, and then everybody thinks that, oh, this is good. This is much better than the increase of the permanent seat. So that is a way we need to proceed tactically. So that's why I believe we will not give up this idea of becoming a full-fledged member, expanding the number of the permanent seat. We'll stick to this for the time being. And then, as you said, this year until next year, in the United Nations is a very, very important window of opportunity. This year we are going to have the Peace Summit. Next year is the 75th anniversary of 85th. Anyway, some anniversary of the United Nations
Some big one.
foundation. So there will be a kind of celebration. So this 1 year, from September this year until September next year, will be a big opportunity for doing something about what we call global governance.
Great. So it's right at the 4:30, but maybe I can ask one last question before I let you go. This is going to be two-part, even though I said one question. So given the nature of this nature of the changing dynamics, and then you really laid it out for us on various parts, but then you spent most time talking about dynamics within ASEAN. And we just talked about super permanency for the United Nations as a possibility, super non-permanency. So in that spirit, there are some people who talks about the potential for Quad membership to be expanded. And when we do that, at the current moment, we often talk about the Republic of Korea. But what are your thoughts about the Philippines could be potentially included in the Quad? That's part one of my last question. And then the last, you talked about challenge sharing as a trend. And in light of past experiences with the Trump administration, where U.S. has backed out from a key multilateral framework like TPP, and also we talked about the rise of India and Indonesia. Can or should Japan create minilaterals in the Indo-Pacific region without U.S.? And if that could be the potential, what countries and sectors you think would be the best fit? I'm sure there are multiple combinations that we can go, so maybe I'll just ask you to do like top two, maybe.
So you would like me to do it in 1 minute or 5 minutes?
5.
Okay, 5 minutes then. Quad, I think ROK is definitely the country with the best potential for becoming Quad, because I think Quad member need to have two qualifications. One is country has to be willing to join. And as I said, China succeeded in painting a Quad as an anti-Chinese organization, which deterred many countries to become the member, because becoming a member of Quad means they are seen as anti-Chinese. So I believe, including the Philippines and Indonesia, none of the Southeast Asian countries who want to stay in good relation with everybody during the peaceful time to be ready to join. So I don't think the Philippines is willing to join. I mean, for Philippines, joining Quad means leaving kind of ASEAN, right? Kind of taking sides in ASEAN. So I don't think that's going to happen. And of course, the second qualification is country needs to have some capability for making some changes, because Quad is not the sort of chatting club, talking club. They are chatting, but I think they have a lot of working groups, one of which is for the capacity building of the countries in the region. And so the new member need to have a capability for doing some sort of capacity building for the countries in
offer something to that.
In the region. Okay. So those countries which clear these two hurdles, not so many. And ROK is perfectly positioned for clearing these challenges. And then if they raise hand, we are very happy to accept. So I think, and that they need to do it now, I think.
Right.
Okay, and challenge sharing minilaterals in Asia, I think as I said, one idea is, as I said, Indonesia and India will become very, very important for creating a majority. And at the same time, India and Indonesia, their relation is getting very close nowadays, simply because in the past few years, they face with the same challenge coming from the north. So I think China overdid it in the past few years. So that made these two countries getting very close. So I think countries like Australia has already realized this trend, and then Australia succeeded in creating Australia, India, Indonesia trilateral. And Japan would very much like to do the same. And I think there are ways to do it.
Great. Thank you. My head is still hurting from all the charts that you created, by the way, with the different populations and GDPs. But this was a great role of a world tour and assessment of the bilateral summit and the U.S. Japan Philippines summit. So I'm very, very honored to have you. Thank you so much again for spending a little bit time with me on the Friday afternoon in such a nice weather. And thank you everybody for joining and personally coming here in attendance. And thank you for all of you who have joined us online.
Yeah, thank you for staying. Huh?
And thank you really for staying truly toward the end. So thank you so much. Thank you very much.